In this lesson, we'll define a new tool. After completing this lesson, you'll be able to create a custom end mill and enable cloud tool libraries. In Fusion 360, for the next several lessons, we're going to be using the dataset Manufacture Toolpaths. However, for this first part, we don't actually need to have a new design open. So in order to do this, I'm going to start with an untitled document and navigate to the Manufacture workspace. What we're going to be doing is taking a look at creating a new tool inside of a new cloud library. There are a few things I want to mention before we get started. Inside your user preferences, there are a few things that we want to make sure are enabled. And first, in the General Manufacture section, make sure that Enable Cloud Libraries is checked. Next, in the Preview features, I want to point out that in the Manufacture workspace, there is a preview feature for a new tool library. This will change the way that the library looks, so we want to make sure that we explore this. To get started, I'm going to make sure that that's off, and then I'm going to navigate to Manage and Tool Library. On the left-hand side, we have a section for Documents, Cloud, Local, Vendors, and Samples. The Samples library contains a large amount of different holders and tools that we can copy and modify for our use. Inside of the Local, we would have any tool libraries that we create that we want saved only on the machine we're currently working on. However, in the Cloud section, we can create tool libraries that'll be saved and synced to the cloud, which means that if you log into Fusion in multiple different computers, then you can make sure that you have the same tool access. So for this example, we're going to right-click on Cloud and create a new library. For this new library, we're going to call it Intro to ME and MFG. Now that it's selected, note that I have a check mark in the left-hand side. The check marks will allow us to hide or show different libraries and have them be omitted from any filtering. So right now we have Intro to ME and MFG, and inside here at the top you can see that as well. I want to create a new tool inside here, and to do that, notice that if we right-click, we've got a lot of grayed out options, and it allows us to do things like edit and copy tools. But in order to create a new one, we'll need to go to this upper section and select the type of tool or holder we want to create. In our case, we're going to be creating a new milling tool. We're going to start by going to the General section and put a description. I'm going to enter 1/2 inch end mill. In the Cutter section, this is where we're going to define the actual geometry. So from here, I'm going to select flat end mill. I'm going to change the number of flutes. And I also want to note that the units that we're seeing are metric. The units that we're seeing in the tool library currently are based off of the units that we have in the file that we're currently in. However, we can change the units inside of here. So we're going to set the diameter of this tool to 0.5. Whenever you're making a new tool, it's important to make sure that you're matching geometry of a physical tool that you have access to. If you order certain tools from manufacturers, it's also a good idea to make sure that you put that information directly inside of the tool. That way, if somebody needs to replace the tool or validate the measurements, they can know exactly where to look. Inside of here, we determine the rotation of the spindle, the material, and whether or not there's through tool coolant. We can then determine any specific parameters about the shaft, the holder, and the feeds and speeds. We're not going to be going in depth into feeds and speeds. This is an area that you should be comfortable with if you are creating toolpaths and running a machine. This information generally comes first from tool manufacturers for a recommended setting. But you also need to understand various parameters such as the machine, the fixturing, the speed at which you can turn a tool, and the speed at which you can move it. That in addition to the material of the tool, the material that you're cutting, the coolant you have available, and many other factors. Next is the post-processor. This is going to define the tool number, any additional comments that we might want to see, and the type of coolant. We're going to leave flood coolant on, and also note that in this case, we can set this as a live tool, which means it can also be used for C-axis machining on a CNC lathe. So from there, we're going to say OK, and notice that we have our 1/2 inch flat end mill. Before we finish, let's navigate back to our preferences, back to Preview Features, and let's turn on the new tool library. I'm going to apply that change and say OK. Then I want to go back into the tool library, and now I'm going to take a look at the same library we just created, Intro to ME and MFG, and notice that inside of here, we see the tool that we created. The layout's slightly different. For example, if we want to create a new tool, we have the plus icon to create a new tool directly above the library. Also on the right-hand side, we have filters and info. We can see a preview of the tool. We have a good idea of the scale, and we can also do things like edit the tool or edit presets if needed. One thing you will note is that when we're looking at all of these different libraries, we don't have the same checkbox that we saw originally when we were working in the current library. So we don't have quite the same level of filtering and selection that we do, but generally when we're looking for a tool, we're either looking in all libraries in that area, or we're looking in one specific library. So we're going to carry on throughout these next couple lessons using this new Preview tool library. So make sure that you have this one active as we move on to our next lesson. And since we didn't make any changes to the file itself, we don't actually need to save the untitled document, but make sure that you do have the manufacturer toolpath dataset open.